I arrived at Mike's house late on a Friday afternoon, backpack slung over one shoulder and a duffel bag in the other. It was the start of a much-needed weekend break from college, and Mike had invited me to spend a few days with him back in his hometown. I hadn't been there in years, not since we were both scrawny high school kids obsessed with video games and basketball. Now, at 19, everything felt a little different. We were both still close, but the air around us had changed, older, heavier, with unspoken things. Claire opened the door when we pulled up. She hadn't aged in the way most people did. There was a grace to her, an elegance that came with restraint. Her auburn hair was pulled into a soft twist, and her green eyes seemed to hold a kind of quiet depth I hadn't noticed before. She smiled when she saw me and pulled me into a brief, warm hug that lingered just a second longer than I expected. Her perfume was subtle, jasmine maybe, and it clung to my clothes long after she stepped back. Mike cracked a joke about how she still treated us like little kids, but her eyes found mine for a flicker longer before she turned away. Dinner that night was casual. Grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, a bottle of red wine that Claire poured, only for herself. Mike did most of the talking, updating her on our classes, friends, campus life. Claire asked questions, but hers had a different kind of edge. She asked me about my interests, what I was reading, how I was feeling away from home. Her eyes didn't dart around like Mike's did. They stayed fixed, calm, almost studying me. I tried not to read too much into it, but it was there. Something unsaid, hanging just between our conversations like the faint hum of music from the living room speaker. After dinner, Mike went upstairs to grab something from his room, and I offered to help Claire clear the table. She declined, saying I should relax. Her hand brushed mine as she took a plate, and I felt a sharp, involuntary breath catch in my throat. It was nothing, probably. Still, it stayed with me as I followed Mike up the stairs and into the guest room next to his. That night, around 1 a.m., I got up to get some water. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes with well-insulated walls in late suburban. Sleep. I padded softly into the kitchen and stopped cold when I saw Claire sitting at the dining table, a half-full glass of wine in front of her. She looked surprised for only a second before offering me a slow, tired smile. "Couldn't sleep, either?" she asked. I shook my head, filled a glass at the sink, and hesitated before sitting across from her. She looked softer in the dim light, almost vulnerable. Her robe was loosely tied at the waist, her legs crossed beneath the table. "Long day?" I asked, just to fill the silence. She tilted her head slightly. "Long life," she said with a wry smile, then sipped her wine. "Marriage is not what I imagined it would be at 20. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. There was something in her voice, in the way her gaze lingered on mine, that made my chest tighten. She was beautiful. Not in the airbrushed, obvious way, but in a lived-in, real way, like she knew what it meant to be wanted and forgotten at the same time. "You're a thoughtful young man," she said, and I felt her toe lightly touch mine, under the table. "Not like most of Mike's friends." I forced a laugh. "I'll take that as a compliment." She reached out, brushing her hand over mine gently. It was something about the touch. It was soft, almost motherly. But the silence after said something else. I pulled my hand away slowly, politely, trying not to make it awkward. She didn't say anything more, just finished her wine, and stood. "Get some sleep," she said softly. "You'll need it tomorrow." I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Was she lonely? Was she just being kind? Or was I letting my imagination run wild? I thought about her hand, her eyes, the low, quiet sadness in her voice. It felt wrong to think of her like that, but my body didn't agree. I hated that. I hated how easily I could recall the warmth of her skin, the soft touch of her fingers. She was Mike's mom, my best friend's mother, off limits in every sense. But even as I tried to shake it off, her voice echoed in my mind. Long life. What did that even mean, really? I wondered how often she sat alone at night with her wine, waiting for someone to see her, not as a mom or a wife, but as a woman. I didn't know if it was pity I felt, or attraction. Maybe it was both. Maybe that was what made it worse. I turned over in bed, pulling the covers up to my chest, but the heat didn't go away. Neither did the way she looked at me, like she saw more than she should have, and maybe wanted more than either of us could say. The next morning started quietly. Sunlight slipped through the kitchen window, warm and unassuming. The kind of light that makes everything seem innocent even when it's not. Mike was getting ready to head out. Something about meeting his old coach for a quick pickup game. He offered to drop by the store on the way back, asked if I wanted anything. I told him no, and watched him grab his keys, sling his bag over his shoulder, and disappear out the front door with a shouted, "Back in a bit." I wandered into the kitchen a few minutes later. Claire was already there. She wore a loose white t-shirt tucked slightly into soft gray lounge pants, barefoot, her hair still slightly damp from a shower. She looked up from the coffee pot and smiled in that same slow, quiet way she had the night before. There was nothing obvious about her, but everything about her made me feel suddenly aware of my own breathing. "Sleep okay?" she asked. I nodded, reaching for a glass. "Yeah. You?" She shrugged. "I never really sleep deeply anymore." I avoided her eyes, knowing too well where that conversation could go. She handed me a cup of coffee, her fingers brushing mine again, deliberate or not. I didn't know. Maybe I did. I thanked her quietly, then mumbled something about taking a shower before Mike got back. She just nodded, eyes still holding mine a second too long. Upstairs, I walked down the hallway toward the bathroom, towel slung over my shoulder. The door creaked a little as I opened it. I stepped inside, turned on the faucet to let the water run warm, then heard a soft knock behind me. Claire stood at the threshold, holding a folded towel. "You forgot these," she said simply. I took them from her, trying to smile without making it awkward. "Thanks." She didn't leave. "I always hated this bathroom," she said, stepping just inside. Too small, no windows. I looked around, suddenly very aware of how narrow the space was with both of us inside. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound casual. "Kind of claustrophobic." There was silence for a moment. Heavy. Still. Claire turned toward me and gently reached out, her fingers brushing my arm, light as breath. I froze. Her eyes locked onto mine, not teasing, not playful, but deep and searching. "You don't have to pretend you don't feel it too," she said. My mouth went dry. I didn't know what to say. My heart beat in my ears. "Claire," I whispered, barely. She stepped closer, and for a long second, neither of us moved. Then she kissed me. Softly at first, hesitant, testing. When I didn't pull away, couldn't, she deepened it. Her hands moved to the sides of my face, then my shoulders. My body moved without thinking, drawn in like gravity. I fumbled behind. Mian closed the door with a soft click, pressing the lock in with trembling fingers. The space between us vanished. Her body pressed against mine, warm and firm. I could feel her breath against my neck, smell the faint trace of her skin cream and shampoo. My hands found her waist, the curve of her back. Time felt suspended, like the world outside didn't exist anymore. Her mouth moved over mine, slow and hungry. The sound of water still running in the sink filled the silence, almost absurd in its ordinariness. Her hands guided mine under the fabric of her shirt. She sighed softly against my lips, and it sent a pulse of heat down my spine. My mind tried to catch up, to make sense of it, but my body was already lost. I wasn't thinking about Mike. I wasn't thinking about what would come next. It was just the pressure of her mouth, the weight of her against me, the heat in that tiny, windowless room where the air had turned heavy with need. And then, just as suddenly, she pulled away. She took a small step back, fingers adjusting the hem of her shirt, eyes unreadable. She smoothed her hair quickly in the mirror, then turned the faucet off as if she'd just stepped in to check the water temperature. "You should take a breath," she said quietly. Then she opened the door and walked out, barefoot, calm, her movements effortless. I stood there alone in the bathroom, hands shaking, lips still tingling with the memory of her. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, the cool tile pressing against my thighs, my heart racing so loud I could hear it echo in the walls. It had happened. I had kissed her, touched her. She had kissed me. It wasn't imagined. It wasn't a fantasy. It was real. But what did it mean? Had it meant anything to her? I didn't know if it was just physical for her or something else. A moment of weakness. A game. For me, it felt like everything and nothing all at once. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. Like I had just crossed into a part of myself I didn't know existed and didn't like. I looked at myself in the mirror above the sink. My reflection stared back, flushed, shaken, unfamiliar. I didn't see a guy who had just lived out some unspoken fantasy. I saw someone who didn't know who he was anymore. Then I heard it. Mike's laugh from the front yard, carefree, innocent, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. I joined Mike in the living room like nothing had happened. He was exactly how I'd left him, feet up on the couch, controller in hand, yelling at the screen like we were still 16. He tossed me the second controller, and we slipped back, into that familiar rhythm of trash talk and laughter, both of us pretending life was simple. I tried to focus on the game, on the buttons under my fingers, on the beat of music in the background. But my head was somewhere else entirely. Claire passed by once or twice, walking through the hallway, offering a neutral smile like she hadn't just kissed me with the kind of hunger that could break a person in half. She moved with the same grace, her robe tied tighter than before, her hair dry and swept back. I watched her out of the corner of my eye, catching every subtle movement, reading too much into each glance she did or didn't give. My skin still burned from where her hands had been. We ordered food, laughed about stupid things from school, watched a movie. Mike didn't notice the way my eyes kept flicking toward the stairs, or the way I'd get quiet in the middle of a joke. I kept thinking I should leave, but I didn't. Later that evening, I was heading back upstairs. When I saw her in the hallway, she was standing near the bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines like she was searching for something. I paused, unsure if I should speak. She turned slowly and looked at me, and for a moment, the silence between us filled the entire house. "You're not a boy anymore," she said quietly. I didn't move. I didn't speak. Her eyes lingered on mine, calm and unreadable. She stepped closer and placed her hand gently on my chest. Just a moment. Just enough to feel the weight of her fingers in the distance behind her eyes. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She just gave me that same look she'd given me in the bathroom, like she knew exactly what she was doing and exactly how much it would cost. Then she walked away. And I stood there in the hallway, heart pounding, completely unsure whether I was supposed to feel honored, used, or something else entirely. The next morning came with awkward calm. The sun was too bright, the air too still. I packed my bag slowly, half expecting her to appear again, to say something more. Something definitive. But she didn't. Mike hugged me in that sloppy, affectionate way he always did, clapping my back like we'd just survived some unforgettable adventure. "Next time, stay longer," he said, grinning. Claire stood by the door, arms crossed loosely, face perfectly composed. "Take care," she said. Nothing more. The drive back to campus was quiet. I kept the radio off, windows down, trying to drown my thoughts in the wind. But they kept coming back, looping through my mind like a fever dream I couldn't shake. Her touch, her voice, the look in her eyes, the lock on the bathroom door clicking, into place. Mike's laugh floating up from the yard. I didn't know what to make of it, if it had meant something real, or if I'd been just another moment in a long chain of moments she kept hidden beneath her calm exterior. Should I tell Mike? Could I ever? Would it even matter? Or would it only make everything worse? A part of me wanted her to text me, to say something, anything, to prove it wasn't just a fluke. Another part hoped I'd never hear from her again, so I wouldn't have to keep carrying the weight of that locked door and what it did to who I thought I was. I crossed a line I never imagined crossing. I felt wanted, needed in a way that was raw and dangerous and real. But I lost a part of myself in that bathroom. A piece of me that believed I was better than this. That loyalty meant something. That temptation could be resisted if your heart was in the right place. Even now, I don't know if it was worth it.